There is a ruler of this land. It is not a king, nor any noble, or us priests who live longer than any human who may vie over this world. No, it is no mortal person, or a monster any of us can truly understand. What rules Sarathus and all other known places is a dragon, a beast as ancient as the very breath which flows through the land. Yet, we do not cast our gaze up at the dragon in despair as our neighbors do when one of the inexplicable elders turns their eyes upon their nations. Her call soothes the souls of the monsters she bade us to live in harmony with. Her fins stir the clouds so they bring rain. Her mist blankets the earth so we know not the pain of hunger or the indignity of a failed harvest. Her heartbeat calls the veins to flow in concert with her. She is the earth beneath our feet, and the heavens which guides our fates. She is the Sentinel. She is our divine Aenshin. Look, I had to do it at least once this video, sue me. So, this video is going to contain spoilers for the entirety of Monster Hunter Stories 3. You have about 3 seconds to leave before I start talking about the ending. Alright, can we talk about Aenshin? I really need to talk about Aenshin. I finished the game a few weeks ago, and this gal has been stuck in my brain. I have a lot of thoughts on her metatextual narrative and how she fits in the wider Monster Hunter lore, so that's why I'm making this video. Welcome to the video, this is what it's about. The structure here is my interpretation based on the facts we have, so if you have disagreements, that's honestly fine. But I think I have a pretty strong theory to present based on everything we know of how this world functions. I don't have no horse in the race on if the stories universe and the mainline universe is the same. However, I do think baseline lore is consistent across the board regardless of which camp you exist in. Got it? Okay, let's go! To start off, I want to pose a question. What do we know about Aenshin? Given the nature of the game's narrative, the answer is both exactly what we need to know and nothing close to the full story. Pretty typical for an Elder Dragon. What we do know is that Aenshin once ruled over the known world, at least that's what our characters call this lovely slice of a continent right here, as this was its territory and the people here worshipped it as a god. Whether the Sentinel we see is an ancient elder or the most current in a generation, who can say? No book or game lore has given any exacts on how Elder Dragons age or even how long they can live, aside from the vague probably thousands of years with how Wyverians also live for centuries and they're related to one another. So all we know for sure is that they are mortal and will die natural deaths. Metatextually, Elder Dragons follow a familiar script. They are powerful beings of unknown purpose and strength which can cause massive upheavals to entire environments should they draw too close. Some only cause minor damage in the weather, calling thunderstorms, spawning powerful tornadoes, bringing drought on their wings. Others are calamity incarnate. Almost all elders share a similar narrative across the games. They are the cause of environmental damage or ruinous change and must be dealt with in some way. The killing of an Elder Dragon is often treated as necessary and even a good, which is celebrated. Across the games, it's pretty rare for this narrative to be challenged. Elder Dragons make for great final bosses and amazing representations of nature's fury or humanity's impact upon it, so this isn't a criticism. I love Elder Dragons and turning them into shiny weapons. However, Ancient is one of the few times this narrative has been flipped on its head, and it's in a completely different manner compared to Cetus, Kolveteroth, or Primordial Malzeno. How Elder Dragons fit into the world of Monster Hunter is intentionally vague and full of mystery. In universe, there is a debate on if they are actually living creatures like the sapient peoples or their monsters, or if they are something else. I personally fall into the camp of elders being akin to nature spirits or gods who function in a similar manner to how Kami and Shinto spiritual beliefs do. They are both natural creatures who have instincts and can be interacted with, while also being unnatural entities who exist outside of the realm of regular reality. Not separate from nature, but nature itself incarnate. Of course, this isn't the only explanation. Both in fandom and in universe, there are those who seek purely physical explanations for Elder Dragons and their behavior, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But for myself, I love to look at them with a more supernatural perspective. Religion in Monster Hunter could be a fun topic to explore one day, but not today, at least as it extends beyond Ancient. Unlike other elders of her size and power, Ancient is depicted as having once been an entirely benevolent creature that was worshipped as a god by the people of Sarathus. Ancient's role in the environment was not a nomadic destroyer, but a protector who guarded her territory against all outside threats for generations. So revered was she that even monsters 200 years later respond to her call as one of safety. They still know her even if mankind has forgotten. If she is anything, she is a victim of the machinations of people and their war. Ancient could be described as the known world itself as a physical being, and like it, she is blighted and ailing due to her mind no longer being her own. This can easily be seen in how she exists within Simon's narrative, the way the antagonists view her, and the final battle against her. To Simon, Aenshin is a threat to the world, which must be snuffed out in order to protect it. He serves as a stand-in for a typical hunter narrative, where he sees the massive dragon that destroyed his home as the cause of his suffering. If this was a mainline Monster Hunter game, Simon would be in the place of a protagonist. However, in Stories 3, he is decidedly misguided in his hatred of Aenshin. He sees her not as a victim of the crimes of the past like he is, but his hatred is so strong that he almost condemns an innocent life for the sins of its parent. Given what we know at the end of the story, if he had gone through with it, this one short-sighted act would have spelled the known world's doom. I could probably do a whole Simon video. I should probably do a whole Simon video. But anyways, our main antagonists, Firo and Clarissa, see Aenshin, especially the baby, as a potential weapon. Vermeil's mistake is seeing nature as something to still be exploited even as their country faces imminent environmental collapse. Battle binding may have gotten the known world into this mess, but it offers a short-sighted solution to their problems. They see war and bloodshed as the singular way out, very similar to their ancestors' views, which started the Rift War in the first place. In contrast to both of these, our protagonists, the Rangers, and Inna, on the other hand, have found out the truth about Aenshin and enlightenment along the way. While they may not know everything, they have come to understand Aenshin's role in the environment and that the known world needs her to survive the encroachment long term. It was not the Elder Dragon which caused the world's problems this time, and blaming her to absolve humanity will only exacerbate the issue. Ultimately, all of these stories come to a head with Aenshin's egg in the final battle. We all know how this goes. The egg ends up in the hand of Simon, who ultimately cannot bring himself to do something that goes against his morals and the person he became as a ranger. Both he and Clarissa give up their plans born out of blind hatred, thus finally understanding that taking a life, or destroying Azoria using a forcibly bound Aenshin in Clarissa's case, won't heal the wounds of the past or bring them the future they seek to create. Then Simon, with the help of the heir and Rathavi, is brought to the same enlightenment our characters come to throughout the events of the game, before we finally face the ailing Sentinel in a tragic attempt to save her. This entire last sequence reminds me a lot of Princess Mononoke. In fact, a lot of the game does. Look at these two shots and try to tell me that the illusion wasn't intentional. The encroachment itself could easily be read as Aenshin's version of the Nightwalker's curse after Lady Eboshi slays the spirit, and the heir is very similar to Ashitaka in the way they are tasked to leave their home and find the truth with their own eyes. Framing the hatching of Aenshin's egg to be like the return of the forest spirit's head solidified to me what the themes of this sequence is. It's about the healing of nature after humanity has left a scar upon the land. It is the return of reciprocity between spirits and people, and is a promise to never damage the land again. However, this isn't a comparison video, so I will stop here, though I do find both stories being similar very interesting. Unfortunately, here in Stories 3, the birth of the new Sentinel is not enough to save the old. The sins of the past cause enough damage that there are scars which will never heal. The Sentinel cannot be brought back as she was, and there is no easy fixes to the problems which have been wrought. But this new life in the young Aenshin brings hope with it. The ending of the game is entirely why Aenshin is my favorite Elder Dragon now. She is the culmination of Stories 3 environmental messaging in a boss fight. I will admit that the whole ending had me crying like a baby multiple times because it hit that hard. But presenting Aenshin's metatextual narrative is only the setup for the theory crafting part of this video. I needed to lay the groundwork of her as a benevolent Elder Dragon for the rest of it to make sense. So next, I want to look at the environmental storytelling present all throughout the game and what that tells us about her role as a Sentinel. As an Elder Dragon, we the audience are left many questions in regards to Aenshin's entire role within the ecosystem. Going off the idea of her being similar to a kami, and obviously in-game dialogue, what I think Aenshin as a species do is act as a keystone or sentinel which keeps the bioenergy within the dragon veins in check as they flow through the known world ecosystem. TLDR, she kept the ecosystem from getting fucked up. My idea on this is spun from a few different places. We know the dragon veins are a world-spanning system that moves a very tangible energy which is the foundation for entire environmental structures and is probably the reason elemental energy plus life exists on this planet at all. We also know of a few elder dragons who seem to feed directly on this energy. Crystallization as a thing exists in Monster Hunter lore outside of Aenshin and the Encroachment, most notably in World with the Elder's Recess plus Confluence of Fates, and Frontiers where it was a status ailment. Strong monsters are also notable for having portions of their bodies crystallize the more elemental power they have absorbed. It's the basis for wyvern gems, Rathian rubies, and other gem-like monster parts we get from carving, so her power has precedence within the series. And we are pretty much directly told what the heir believes about her, Aenshin as a protector, during the Peace Talks cutscene, and Little Senti is spelled out as a singular way to eventually end the encroachment. The known world in Stories 3 has a few notable quirks which makes it plausible to me that the dragon veins are strong here, thus would attract Aenshin and require a dragon like her to make sure the balance of nature is upheld. Elemental energy saturates the environment to a higher degree than what is normal. It's to a point that monsters can occasionally have their elements changed to reflect the energy they were bathed in before they were born. The game describes these as rare variants in universe. Their most notable appearance outside of your party is being almost every feral monster, which probably means nothing at all. Such elemental variance isn't unknown to Stories, but will be very novel in the context of mainline lore. An easy justification would be that the veins of the earth having an intense effect on monster ecology here. Small regions of the world having phenomenon that goes against regular natural order is fairly common in Monster Hunter as is. These bioenergy-rich lands attract multiple elder dragons to the area. Now some of this is pure gameplay, but we do know that elders are prone to taking territory in regions with high vein activity. This happens most notably in the New World, where dramatic crystallization of their bioenergy explicitly occurs within the Elder's recess. In-game text in the World Lore book spells out how Elder Dragon death cycles is the driving force behind the crystals that grow in the recess. When a dragon comes to die in the Rotten Vale, some of their energy remains and becomes crystallized while the majority goes on to feed the Everstream energy nexus. That's the New World specific branch of the veins. The Confluence of Fates is so drenched in this energy that the whole area has been entirely crystallized. The one reason we're given as to why this happens in the Everstream is because of the New World being the Elder's grave. One dragon alone would not be able to crystallize the ecosystem so dramatically. Be eons worth of dragons being born and returning here to die? Well, this is the result. So how does Aenshin play into these systems? Well, what would happen if there was an elder with the ability to directly manipulate the energy within the dragon veins? Not only consuming it like the Jivas, but maintaining it. I think the result is Aenshin. This species could be like a counterweight to the Jivas and other destructive elder dragons. First, I would examine the mist she creates within her body as a starting point to unravel what she was before her corruption. From what we can see, Aenshin uses the mist to blanket an area she approaches. It appears to serve a few different purposes. First is to mask the elder dragon's location. Such would be useful in battle against other elders as it would confuse and disorient them. The mist likely also stirs rain clouds, another method of masking herself while benefiting the environment by providing consistent rainfall and weather patterns. The second main use correlates directly to her main attacking mechanism, the energy beam she uses to freeze her prey. During each attack by Aenshin, she releases a bunch of mist before launching her assault. When this mist is released, crystal flecks fill the air, as Aenshin appears to be able to create them within her body, and seeing all this is what makes Simon realize what's about to happen. I am going to come back around to what I think is happening here, but to keep it simple, I believe Aenshin is stirring up and absorbing ambient bioenergy, which then allows her to release her crystallization beams. The way this attack happens is very similar to Safi Jiva's patterns with absorbing bioenergy and releasing pure blue rays of it, though it lacks the instant crystallization part. The way I see it, her body interacts with the ambient energy of the veins within the air, and more potently affects the same energy where it saturates the ground. These defense mechanisms are more potent after her unintentional battle binding, but were present before the Rift War broke out 200 years ago. Since her main function was maintaining the natural balance of her territory, this is most acutely expressed itself in keeping other destructive elders from throwing it into chaos. Crystallized Lao offers the biggest clue as to how she did this. This Laotian lung was crystallized well before Aenshin lost control of herself, and serves as an example to what the Sentinel did to elders who invaded her territory. There are environmental storytelling reasons as to why I think the Lao must have been frozen before Tarkwan became a desert, which I will outline here. Firstly, Yamasokami is the reason Tarkwan is a desert in the first place. Centuries before the main plot, this area was once an inland sea, and the entirety of it was uprooted and taken away by a Tsukami which had nested in the area. The Yama's presence here at all is a clue in and of itself for when the removal of the sea took place. Aenshin would have crystallized and consumed any Tsukami which came close to her territory. Removal of threats to her ecosystem is spelled out as the main thing she did, so another elder being around to change a whole region so drastically tells me that Aenshin must have been slumbering by the time it showed up. The environment around the Laotian lung gives more clues. Close by the entombed elder, there are trunks of massive ancient trees. It's likely this area was more akin to a temperate rainforest, as huge trees like these are often seen in environments like the Everwood, Scarlet Forest, Ancient Forest, etc., etc. With these, we can even see the way the beam was fired. It passed through the Lau's body from the west and moved east to hit the forest before Aenshin lifted her head to spare the rest. Both the Lau and the trees share the same egg quartz color and composition, which means they must have all been blasted at the same time. With how thoroughly the Lao Shenlong is crystallized, its death is different from other monsters we see frozen in egg quartz. The dragon's body is one mass of crystal. Even its internal organs have been completely crystallized to where no living tissue remains. The trees next to it are also found in a similar state, almost appearing as if they exploded before settling into place. This would be Aenshin at her true strength. Notably, the crystal from the trees haven't spread to cover the entirety of the Rococo rocks like we see in other areas blighted by the encroachment. This is another clue to this being a deliberate and careful freezing by the Sentinel, at least in my opinion. So this does beg the question as to why she didn't eat the Lao directly like she does with other monsters. To be honest, I think the easy answer is that it is way too big even in relation to her, though I do think she was eating it in an indirect way. I'll get to that in a moment. Crystallization appears to come in a few different forms. First, we have frozen and entombed monsters, both in egg quartz and not, static at the moment of their deaths. Death here is in quotation marks because not every monster appears to die from being entombed. Most notably, two battle-bound monsters from Lasleon's destruction unfreeze and break out of the quartz with no lasting effects from being frozen for over 200 years. The only difference is the Lao being so thoroughly frozen that it is conclusively dead. Due to the dragon's size, Aenshin likely had to fire a more sustained and powerful shot to subdue the Elder, and that left it as one massive egg quartz with no living tissue left. The typical lotus flower-like shell that encases egg quartz specimens also exists around the lower portion of the Lau's body. Why exactly this forms, I'm not entirely sure, but one could argue it protects the alive specimen, or is just a way the outer layers of the crystal solidify. Not every bit of egg quartz has this shell, but it's fairly common. And not every monster is even entombed, as evident by all the Rathaloses in Lasleon. Our characters speculate that egg quartz, or at least most egg quartz, is the direct byproduct of the corrupted Aenshin rampaging through an area. Her mists and her energy rays are the two methods by which she will crystallize the environment and everything within it, with the latter being obviously much more acute and destructive. The Rangers come to believe that the crystallization is Aenshin attempting to protect the environment as she has always done, which went awry due to the binding crystal she ingested. I do think that I can agree with them, with some caveats attached. What I think happens when Aenshin directly crystallizes something is that the bioenergy within these monsters is frozen all at once. It leaves them in stasis until something occurs to awaken their energy, thus bringing them back to the exact state in which they were frozen in the first place. Unless it's something as thorough as the big guy. Monsters being alive in this state is really the only explanation I can give for why the battle-bound monsters were able to awaken as they did. Egg quartz serves as an extra step in this containment process. However, as I said, not all monsters we see frozen by Aenshin end up in egg quartz, so what makes this process unique? All the egg quartz we see throughout the game share a few of the same qualities. Deposits of egg quartz often form distinct structures, which are spherical in nature, hence the name. The gems entombing what's inside can come in a variety of colors, but the most often seen is blue. Often they are buried underground in cave systems or inside of mountains and emerge at a later date. Sometimes egg quartz is left out in the open air and will be found in large deposits. Monsters, endemic life, and plant life are all things that can become frozen in egg quartz. Most frozen monsters appear as if they were in the middle of action, fighting or attempting to flee. However, not all egg quartz appears to have any life at all inside of them, as most geodes appear to be 100% crystal, with the ones that hold actual monsters being much rarer. As we see in Galiad, egg quartz comes in a large array of colors, and NPCs often describe there being rainbow-like patterns within the quartz which makes it unique. To connect this back to World again, crystals formed by Elder Dragon bioenergy have these exact color ranges. While the majority rendered in-game is colorless white or blue, the Elder's Recess portion of the complete works describes these gems as coming in a rainbow of colors, and even gems with one dominant color have rainbows within them, which makes them unique to all other ore. So I think they have to be formed in the same base energy. What I believe egg quartz to actually be, before Aenshin began to mass crystallize basically everything, was a form of dragon vein energy management via modification of how the veins naturally work. So if the Sentinel originally influenced the flow of the dragon veins, I think that the natural crystallization process of excess bioenergy would become more pervasive in a region where an Aenshin is present. If we look at the monster materials we see in-game, we do not only see fully intact monsters, but also parts like horns and shells which appear to have been opalized, for lack of a better term. This leads me to think not all egg quartz we see energy is a byproduct of Ancient's accidental battle binding, especially for specimens found underground. A lot of it is likely monsters or their parts that were fossilized by the dragon veins after their death due to Ancient being in the area. As their bones or their hard tissue were buried, crystals formed around them, leaving the specimens behind. Because of the Sentinel's body crystallizing bioenergy in the air for generations, the shed flecks would have seeped into the ground over time and inevitably had an impact on the geologic and decay process of the known world. Basically, egg quartz is like a form of fossilization with a fantasy twist. Egg quartz with fully intact monsters would, thusly, be the product of a rampage during the Rift War, or the odd specimen that was frozen for any number of reasons before that. Some monsters could have been frozen and buried thousands of years ago, only to naturally emerge later when they were mined out or the land shifted. For egg quartz that lacks a monster, and we see a lot of these as background props, the process would be similar to world structures. When bioenergy becomes too much for the veins to distribute properly, portions of it will crystallize in geodes and then get pushed out as the planet changes by way of elder dragon or natural process. Egg quartz in areas where the encroachment is taken over give off little flecks of crystal when they are eroded over time. The energy that these crystals are made from slowly breaks off in tiny flecks, likely in an attempt to rejoin the energy cycle. However, these days, since Ancient isn't around, the flecks are so numerous that without anything that can break them down, they cover areas in what Vermilions call a death drift or a blightstone. Bringing back this cutscene, similar crystals accompany Ancient as it flies and seems to be either expelled from her body or created when it vents mist. I believe Ancient's original purpose in the ecosystem was to feed off of these flecks, break them down into bioenergy actually usable by these ecosystems, and consume the excess which would later be returned after their natural deaths. So as a species, Ancient likely takes resonance in areas of unusually high density of vein nexus points, or that were so awash in energy they can passively feed on it like a whale does with their filter feeding. Crystallized elders like the Lao would be Ancient operating the capacity of an opportunistic predator. Again, like a whale. While she would usually eat them, in cases like this, she can instead freeze a huge monster to act as an energy well for her to feed off of while preventing inevitable destruction of her territory. Otherwise, the crystallized monster she feeds on would be other small opportunistic moments of predation if there was a downturn in the amount of energy flowing through the veins, or if a monster like the Devil Show was causing havoc. Her mist would thus serve a dual-purpose environmental management via rain and cloud formation, a way for her to mask her presence, and a way for her to crystallize excess energy floating in the air to feed off of. So what is the encroachment in this context? From what we know, Ancient has been in slumber since the fall of Serathis, guarding her egg and healing her wounds. However, during this time, while no new egg quartz emerged, the encroachment continues its solemn march across the continent. I believe there is a simple explanation for what is happening if you consider what I've outlined in this video so far. The dragon veins themselves have been poisoned. The dragon veins, or the veins of the earth within Monster Hunter canon, is a network that moves energy around the planet and is the undercurrent for all life. I've been mentioning them throughout this video, but this is really where they start to become apparent and important. No one in the universe knows exactly how they function, but what they do know is that they play an integral role in climates, habitats, and even the harnessing of elemental energy. So what would happen if the energy itself was poisoned? Take a look at how the encroachment affects the environment around it, and I think you will see that this process, at least as it spreads, is not an infection from the outside, but a slow spread from within the Earth itself. The encroachment is the planet undergoing crystallysis. The disease of crystallysis seems to come about in two main ways. First is the direct exposure to Ancient, and the second is long-term exposure to egg quartz dust. Blightstone poisoning is a related condition due to it happening via egg quartz dust getting into the digestive system, but is still distinct as an illness and more acutely deadly compared to the slow progressing crystallysis. To start off the meat of this section, I'll go over the second form of crystallysis first. This form is widespread around Galiad and is seen in a few NPCs such as the Skipper and random NPCs around town dying from the condition. The reason I say they must have contracted crystallysis from long-term exposure to egg quartz is because none of them make any mention of ever coming in contact with an entity like Ancient, and there are far too many in Galiad for exposure to her to be the only cause. Due to the egg quartz trade being what Galiad revolves itself around, the miners who have spent their entire lives in egg quartz mines would be exposed to the crystal flecks that naturally come off the quartz. Breathing in these flecks long-term would cause the bioenergy within their bodies to start to crystallize, as crystallization is how the veins naturally spawn to excess and is the same energy inside of people, which then leads to all of the assorted symptoms. It's basically crystal black lung, which affects the entire body. Extra evidence to my point is in the opening cutscene we see the rangers wearing these masks. These masks would really only be useful if they knew for certain that egg quartz does cause some amount of health complications. My reasoning for why this disease would be unknown to both Azuri and Vermeil is due to blightstone poisoning being a far more common ailment. That and I think Death Drift says Blightstone has some admixture which makes it more acutely poisonous compared to regular egg quartz. It's possible that Vermeil does have cases that Eleanor is not familiar with though. They could simply not have a name for this affliction. Lucas clearly died from crystallysis, but none of the Rangers are aware of what exactly happened to him, aside from Simon, but that's a whole can of worms. Ancient-derived crystallysis happens due to direct exposure to the Elder Dragon. Casimiro, Simon, Arkin, and Firo all contract this version of crystallysis during the story. The symptoms between the two are likely the same with minor differences due to the root cause. Direct exposure to Ancient usually has crystals impact a large portion of the body from the outset, versus the Miner's version which affects different areas of the body very slowly. Both inevitably turns the entire body to crystal, and there appears to be no cure once it is set in. While crystallysis most obviously affects living creatures, the gnome world itself does appear to be sick with similar symptoms. The most clear sign of the encroachment being crystallysis is how it is spreading across the continent and the way environments impacted by it look. Starting with the spread, the worst affected region is Vermeil, with almost the entire country being turned by this point. Azuria's mountains to the north are drenched in crystal as well, with her lowlands remaining unaffected so far. In Kanalta, we see the encroachment starting to consume small bits close to the shelf, but the Dragon Mountains to the north of the Ferroyama is the most affected area in this region. Tarkawan seems mostly spared, with the exception of a bunch of egg quartz littering the region from when Ancient froze a lot of the ocean's living organisms. It is not immune, but spared due to how the veins flow is weak through desert areas. Serathis has not seen crystal consume its frigid environment outside of the Sacrosanctum, despite being the area where the encroachment first began. Volcana coming in and causing the freezing likely slowed the process considerably because, like deserts, the energy movement from the veins is poor. The island is mostly a dead environment, but Gall does point out how nature is attempting to reclaim itself through the flowers in the area. Again, there is still hope here. Areas we can't see are also facing down the encroachment, but this is what we have in game to piece together what's going on. The dragon veins spread energy like how blood flows through a living body. If crystallysis is spread in humans via their own veins, then the earth would also suffer the same. The strongest areas for bioenergy concentration is through mountains, evident by how in most games powerful monsters are found near mountains and volcanoes. The more saturated an area is with raw bioenergy, the more powerful the creatures who live there are. The mountains and their cave systems crystallize first, probably directly hit by ancient rays as a point of origin. Then the poison energy flows down to impact the lowlands from within, while death drift chokes the air from above. Plants crystallize from the inside out. Using this image of the Ashen Pass quickly shows what's going on. The ground crystallizes first around the roots. Then they keep taking up and recycling the energy. The trunks petrifying first before their leaves turn to crystal, and the tree keeps growing into these massive formations. This poison energy goes on to infect more ground. The trees release crystal dust, which settles over unaffected areas, and all of this propagates the spread. The environment then breaks down because everything is turning to crystal and base food chains would implode. The same happens in people. Judging from Simon's crystallysis, which is the best look we get, his skin is scarred from around the areas where the crystals have spread up his arm. Barring him removing new spread, the crystals move up his body as plates of white rock, and then blue crystals start growing from the old areas. This is pretty similar to what's going on with the encroachment. The white land is like the scar tissue that new crystals grow out of, a harbinger of what's to come. Even feral monsters can be explained through the poison veins idea. Almost all of them are rare elemental variants. Already awash in powerful elemental energies, their bodies are able to withstand the crystallization which turns them feral, likely a result of ingesting poisoned blightstone. The remnants of the binding crystals from within Ancient mixing with her bioenergy manipulating properties is the root cause of the poison. She can no longer process the energy the way she used to, nor can she understand what is causing the blight and continues to lash out, which only spreads it further. Her body is permanently stuck in survival mode, and the binding crystals have robbed her of all sense of mind. So her natural methods of maintaining her ecosystem went wrong, and is now changed into something that festers like a curse. Spiritually, this would make the ferals the descendants of the bound monsters, but the binding crystals end up within them instead of being deliberately placed by humans. Ancient being a whale is important to the overall allegory and helps to explain why she can crystallize bioenergy at all. Bringing back an earlier point, it's the Elder Dragon's method of filter feeding. Ancient even has baleen if you look closely, which means she has to be filter feeding on something, which I take as being the crystal flex in the place of krill. Since the veins naturally crystallize excess energy anyways, it's likely that formations like what's in the Elder's Recess could have been common in the known world. So Ancient served as a deterrent to an ecological dead zone event by consuming all of these flecks and keeping them within her body until they could be turned into useful bioenergy again. Without the binding crystals, her original crystallization was benign and would naturally erode by her consuming and recycling it. But since her environment was poisoned, humanity accidentally turned their protector into a threat, just as the heir says during the peace talks. Now she causes the dead zone she originally prevented. New egg quartz emerging upon Ancient's awakening can also be explained with her connection to the land's bioenergy. It wasn't only that she was creating more of it by waking up and the cycle beginning anew, it's that the dragon veins themselves responded to her presence, like they do all elders, and began pushing out old egg quartz and speeding up the crystal's advance in an attempt to restart this feeding process. I'm pretty comfortable in asserting that egg quartz is bioenergy in physical form rather than just a geological deposit. Ancient and monsters like the sky scales who evolved in symbiosis with her once fed off and broke down this energy so it didn't fester. The same reasoning is useful for understanding why monsters and eggs frozen in egg quartz are alive and can even be hatched after using the rite of emergence to awaken them. Kinship stones, likely coming from Ancient as well, given Amara's pendant is quartz from the Elder Dragon and both Azuri and Vermeil's kinship stones share these colors, have to be used to awaken the eggs or monsters from their stasis. The answer to why kinship stones even work in the first place would even tie back to Ancient. If her primary power is control over bioenergy, shards from her body, the kinship stones, might be able to do the same on a smaller scale. Thus, these stones would be able to bind the spirit of rider and monster together. Monsters and riders would become attuned to each other's energy, emotions, and thoughts due to the sheer base connection from the dragon veins channeled through the stones. Ancient, the dragon veins, kinship stones, and even the binding stones being connected helps to explain the functions of each far better than if they were fully separated. The stones used to battle bind monsters are likely modified materials from the same ore used in kinship stones, Stories 1 reference and all that, both of which came from the root source of Ancient, whether the stones fell off of her body or were grown from her power interacting with the dragon veins. Battle binding crystals have the unique property of forcing monsters to change their elemental powers. Their strength is also pushed past the bounds of regular monsters with the equivalent exchange of removing their free will and sense of self. One could argue, easily, that all of these effects caused by the binding was the point of the process. Personally, I think that manipulation of a monster's bioenergy is the easiest explanation for how these stones function, and the ore being a kinship stone base is important for keeping them docile or attached to their programmed directives no matter how much strain their bodies are put through. So too is Ancient is stuck in a loop of attempting to fix the ecosystem, causing more damage, and then attempting more fixes the only way she knows how. All this explains why the encroachment and feral monsters are the big ecological problem facing the known world, besides elder dragons coming in and causing general chaos. The last question on the table is how the young Ancient will reverse the encroachment and return the environment to as it was before the fall. I think everything I've outlined in this video makes it pretty clear what needs to be done. As it grows, the young Sentinel will once again be able to filter feed on the excess bioenergy around the known world. This will help break down crystallized flora and stop continued spread. However, it won't be able to fix what's been broken without the aid of humans. As long as the binding crystals and their poison remain cycling within the veins, it would be an unfortunate inevitability that the young Ancient would fall to the same illness as its mother, so large sources of the crystals need to be removed from the environment altogether. Vermeil has to decommission their honed monsters and destroy the tainted kinship stones. Feral monsters need to be hunted down so Senti does not eat them as it grows. The same can be said for any of the remaining honed monsters. Restoring and understanding habitats changed by the encroachment will also play a huge role. While nature will always be able to right itself and respond to change with adaptation, it is not the role of humans to sit idly by and wait while their actions remain uncorrected. Even with the current generation not being responsible for the mistakes of the Rift War, it is still their responsibility to clean up the mess of their forebears given they know the truth. If they don't, the cycle will simply repeat, or the young Ancient will die before it ever gets a chance to fix things. Hence why the Sacrosanctum becomes a nature reserve until the day humanity can return in reciprocity with their protector once again. It will not be a simple fix. It will be an effort that crosses generations. A garden the rangers sow, yet will never see. But one day the encroachment will be a distant memory, and the new Sentinel will reign over verdant lands just as its mother did. I hope you all enjoyed watching that as much as I did making it. If you did like it, I do encourage you to like, subscribe, and comment. You know, all that YouTuber jazz. I am hoping to make this into a thing I can do more consistently, so any help would be appreciated. If you like my artwork, I do have a Tumblr, Blue Sky, and Ko-Fi linked in my channel bio in the description, but no pressure, obviously. First off, I do want to thank my fellow Stories 3 enjoyers on Tumblr, because genuinely y'all help me refine my ideas, and it's something I feel very proud of. Monster Hunter's World is one of my favorites ever, and I'd love to come back to it again. I did cut a section around the world building in this game, and my speculation on Lasleon's religious relationship with Ancient, so I'm considering making that its own entire video. Right now, I'm replaying Stories 3, so I'm pretty certain I'm gonna want to talk about it more, but tell me if that's something y'all want to see. Also, if there are any other Mon Hun lore heads who know something I missed, I'd love to hear it. This was just my interpretation interpretation of stuff that's been presented in the games and art books. Like I said in the intro, I am just a guy yapping into his microphone about it. But anyways, thank you for watching the video, sitting down in the library with me, and I hope to see y'all again soon.